The background and aims of this, let's just call it an initiative rather than a project, in terms of the local institutional conditions, were that in sort of 2010, I think it was, before I came to the Open University, a colleague of mine, Jill Perry, had set up this. It's called the Open Arts Archive. It's exactly as it says there, in a sense. It's an attempt basically to bridge a kind of gap between art historians at the Open University and the world of museums, art museums and galleries. And it was founded in 2010 with Museums and Libraries Association funding, which then quickly, as you probably know, the MLA then quickly sort of dried up. So when I came into the OU in 2011, I moved from the Manchester School of Art, and it became clear to me that there was a lot of scope for development beyond this archive of a kind of platform for research and scholarship that, in a sense, would involve museums, would involve art galleries in much the same way. But I knew from personal experience that we probably needed to go much further than that and to reach out well beyond those kinds of organisations and beyond the UK, and to include a sort of more global professional field, if you like, of people working in the arts, in curating, in museology, so cultural policymakers and artists, visual practitioners, as well as academics, from beyond the discipline of art history. So I kind of set myself really a task to come up with something that would work much the same way as the Open Arts Archive in bridging these kind of gaps between academia and the wider kind of arts and heritage sector, but to do so in a way that would present us with a kind of a sort of window, if you like, onto our research. Two things I was very keen to try to combat or to rail against from the beginning. The first one is over-specialization. It seemed to me that academia is a place of over-specialization, and this is something I was quite nervous about and wanted to try and combat in some way. The other thing was institutionalization. And so I suppose if you keep those two terms in mind as kind of measures for judging what it is that you think we may have achieved or not achieved. The first, in a sense, brought us towards a greater sense of the need for interdisciplinarity within the humanities, and in a sense to make my discipline, that is art history, sort of work harder for its place in the world. I'm convinced that that it needs to work harder to assert itself in the world. And in the second area, I felt that a closer engagement or interaction with adjacent sorts of institutions and communities in the arts and heritage sector and in arts practice would be a way of trying to sort of break open or break the wall, if you like, beyond our institutional home for the journal. So in a sense, the initiative then emerged from a desire to embrace a sort of diversity of perspectives, and that's why I've given it this sort of open and diverse art scholarship. The other thing I was interested in doing is trying to take advantage of the very large web footprint that the Open University has, and I probably don't need to sort of spell out what that might be, but my sense of it is that as the Open University continues to work as a sort of educational partner for with the BBC, that there's the potential for lots of cross-traffic between different parts of that wide kind of web landscape, and in a sense what we were hoping for is to, if you like, catch some of the kind of cross-traffic from that, and also to tie this in with some of the aims of the Open University more broadly, which, by the way, of course, always include pedagogy, and in a sense, this is a sort of odd one out, I think, for maybe it won't be the only initiative of this kind today that's talked about today, is that it's not a pedagogical initiative. Elton's kind of nodding. I hope that's acceptable. We've done this with a sort of a measure of success, I think, in the sense that when you look at our site statistics, we established ourselves last August, and we've very few pages. We've had something like 15,000 page views. We've had a high conversion rate of visitors to views. and we've had visitors from almost every nation on the globe. Now, okay, I realize after listening to this morning's presentations that it sounds like I'm talking about little plastic dinosaurs, actually, next to some very large and sophisticated projects. But for us, this seemed to be something to feel satisfied about. The fact that we're listed and indexed amongst libraries like the European Library, and we've been listed in the Directory of Open Access Journals, that seems to us kind of something to brag about. Let me talk to you a little bit about the content. Each of the issues, and we've only published 2 so far, come out of a background of existing activity that combined those different sorts of diverse stakeholders, and essentially they began with public events. This was our starting point. For instance, the first issue, which came out of an event that was held in Manchester at the Anthony Burgess Centre a few years ago on the theme of cosmopolitanism as critical and creative practice, that brought together, people working in literary studies, in art history, obviously, art practitioners, contemporary artists, people working in cultural critical theory, some social scientists in there too, and essentially looking at this single theme, which was whether or not cosmopolitanism could offer a sort of space for debating counter discourses to globalization. So a fairly kind of weighty theme, but one that basically would catch the eye when we began. The second issue is this one on pavilions. And the first thing you'll notice about this is that between issues number 1 and 2, we got really very excited. And lots of people got excited with us. And we started to draw in lots of contributors. What we've got there are something like 260 pages of material that is shared between sort of conventional scholarly research to, book reviews, artist statements, curators' kind of, position papers, architects' sort of interventions in this discussion, and of course an afterword there as well in an attempt to try and sum everything up. So, this was similarly a kind of interdisciplinary venture, much larger, perhaps 3 times the size of the first issue, and with about 150 images. And I just wanted to show you what we did with those images. Is we created image galleries. One of the sort of obstacles to open access publishing, as we know, is that lots of academics are reluctant to get involved with this, and lots of people grumble about having to give images, as it were, for free, protected under a Creative Commons license. So what we tried to do is overcome some of those sorts of obstacles, and in fact we did quite well. We have something like 150 images that sit in our high-resolution image gallery, which look like this, and every single one of them has clearance in perpetuity for use online. And they're cross-referenced with the content of the essays and the pieces themselves. And I know this probably seems, as I say, my theme is kind of modesty at the moment, but there's actually a huge amount of work, as you know, goes into this in terms of clearing for copyright, and then all of the essentially, sort of the technical, logistical difficulties of publishing those so that they bear a meaningful relationship to the actual scholarly pieces themselves. So that's one of the things that we kind of feel that we've succeeded in doing quite well, and we'd like to sort of keep on doing that in future. Let me tell you about the third issue. The third issue comes out of a project that I led for 2 years that was the outcome of the first round, if you'll remember the Humanities in the European Research Area funding round. There were the way they did it is they funded, the European Science Foundation funded consortia of researchers who would be in at least 3 European countries at the same time. What I did is I came together with 3 of those consortia and brought them together to focus on a major public event at the Museum of Ethnology in Vienna, subsequently renamed the Weltmuseum Wien, for 2 or 3 days. And we brought together those 3 projects and lots of speakers, essentially under this theme, which was difficult, disturbing pasts, about difficult and traumatic pasts and histories. And so academics from across Europe and artists, curators, policymakers and so on from kind of literally all over the world. What we'll be doing is drawing all of that together into a themed issue of the journal, and you can see June the 5th, I put this up last night just for our benefit. So it would look a little bit like this, and essentially what we have is that same theme again, and then a number of contributors, as I say, from all over the world, from Germany, Nigeria, Netherlands, UK, Poland, etc., Norway, Northern Ireland, and so on. And to make much of the fact that this was the result of long years of European Science Foundation funded projects. Issue 4, in a sense, comes out of a similar public event, but it's more of a scholarly event. It focuses on the early modern period. Much of the content for this has been about the modern and contemporary day, and I never really wanted it to be that narrow. The theme for issue 4 is Touch Me Not, reevaluating the senses, gender and performativity in early modernity. Essentially it comes out of a meeting of the Renaissance Society of America that was held in San Diego about a year ago, with guest editors from 2 US universities and then a number of contributors from around the world. The 5th issue, thank you, is this, it relates to this one. This project, which was another project that I led with AHRC funding and funding from the Netherlands scientific organisation, Organisation for Scientific Research, and the NVO, which is our kind of research council sister organisation in the Netherlands. And so what we're doing is publishing twice a year, and by setting out 5 issues, you can see we're already stretching into some time at the end of next year. I'm going to cut to the chase and wrap up. I mean, essentially what we're trying to do with the future development of the journal is to build on what I would call a kind of re-engagement events. So for the first 2 issues, what we did is they started with public events, in the most part. After publication, I then wanted to come back and invite people again and have a focus event in public, which would reflect on what we'd achieved through the publication, and to film those as well. I should say that most of these public events were filmed, and so for instance, if you look at the Museum of Ethnology event, what I did is I took some technical staff from the Open University with me to Vienna, and we produced these short pieces of footage which relate to the presentations from the conference. And then what we're doing, of course, is cross-linking those to the actual published content itself, so that you know, there's a good bridge, if you like, between them. So there's actually quite a few of these, as you can probably see. It was a 2.5 day meeting with several panels. I'm going to take another 30 seconds. I'm looking at that watch. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, what I'm trying to do is also develop beyond the themed issue format for this, and to have the capacity and the visibility to present general issues of high quality. Setting up a journal is like really quite a taxing endeavour, as I've found out. And it works well to sort of devolve some of the responsibility to guest editors who can produce themed issues. But then, of course, you're sort of hidebound by the themed issue format, so then how do you develop beyond that? And one way to go beyond that. Is there going to be a flash mob in here? You look like those kind of people. You know.
We didn't say anything about it.
Yeah. Well, that was before I got into it.
Arranged deliberately to bring you to an end to the talk.
Yeah, thank you. It's just bring up the volume, bring down the speaker. So essentially, we don't have the capacity really to field, you know, contributions that are general contributions. And what I'd like to do is change that. And in a sense, my next step is to try to share the institutional base for the whole initiative between the Open University and a partner university, or a museum, or a gallery, or an artist collective, or you name it, and of course to share some of the rather negligible, albeit negligible running costs for the journal. And this isn't really a pitch, it couldn't work that way, but if you know, if and when there was adequate interest in that, we would certainly be interested in sharing what I would call our business plan. So thanks very much.